Welcome to Living Well with Ann Beal. Our show is a health show, a lifestyle show, and an empowerment show rolled into one. Get ready to hear some stories of success, healthy living tips, and suggestions to get motivated and live your best life. Now, here is your host, Ann Beal.
Welcome to the show. Today, I have a wonderful guest. Her name is Terri Chapman, and she is the head of... Go ahead.
I'm the director of the Global Sign Languages team for SIL International.
Okay, did you guys get that? She's the director for the Global Sign Languages team for
SIL International.
So that is a linguistics...
A faith-based linguistics organization that works with language communities, minority language communities around the world to help them reach their language development goals.
So it's not a ministry.
It's not a mission.
Not a mission. It is a ministry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely people with a heart for ministry that are involved. So it's wanting to find and reach into language communities that are minority languages around the world that a lot of times minority languages have been ignored, have been kind of overwhelmed by the majority languages within a country. The language specifically or the language family that I specifically work with is sign languages. And maybe I should say to start with that a lot of people don't realize it's not a sign language, that there's at least 400 identified sign languages worldwide. We suspect there's a lot more, but they haven't been researched.
Now that's because the different cultures use different movements?
Different sign languages develop in each culture like any other spoken language does. So it revolves around cultural things and it develops within a context. So just like French develops separately than English, then a sign language in one country is going to develop separately from a sign language in another. There's some influences like there are in spoken languages. There's language families within it, but they are different. They're distinct grammatically, and the signs used are different.
So which one's the most beautiful to you?
Oh my!
I mean, because I hadn't thought about that. So yeah. I just wonder if you're watching it.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say one's more beautiful than another. They're different movements, and I know American Sign Language fluently, and I know Dutch Sign Language fluently. There's a lot of other sign languages, and I just don't know them as well.
So how about between those two?
Oh my! You know what?
Because I met Terri in Holland when I came to speak for GEM
for Greater Europe Mission.
Greater Europe Mission, and so I loved being in Holland very much. It's like my positive anchor. It's like my relaxation focused place. It was just so calm, and I stayed with her and her husband there, and so it was just a wonderful time. So when I think of Holland, of course it's beautiful. Right?
It's a beautiful country. It's different. Now, we had friends in Holland who didn't think Holland was beautiful because to them beauty was mountains, and Holland does not have mountains.
No.
But it's a different kind of beauty. I'm living in Colorado now, and we do have mountains, and that's beautiful, but I thought Holland was beautiful,
It was gorgeous, and the windmills and the flowers. Oh my gosh, the flowers. Acres
you were
and
there
acres
this
of flowers.
springtime.
I got there, I got there near the end of February. And I left right in the middle of March, right? The tulips had not come out yet.
But the crocuses. You
a
probably
lot
got
of them
crocus
had,
vacation,
but not the tulips. And I thought
vacancy.
it was... Oh, and all the baby sheep. There were lambs everywhere. It was just gorgeous, and horses, and just green. But it was a really, really nice time. So I think that the Dutch language, when I think of sign language in Dutch, it would have to be... I just didn't realize that, or I'd have paid better attention, because I saw you doing sign language there at the church.
Well, but I was doing American Sign Language. I had some American deaf friends that lived in Holland, of all things, that I met after I got there, and so that was American Sign Language. At that point, I don't think I had started studying Dutch Sign Language, but while I was there, I ended up first got there and realized I need to learn the spoken language. So I learned to speak Dutch. I pick up languages fairly readily, and I managed to get past the national proficiency exam and spoken Dutch. And I thought, well, okay, in America, before I went over to Holland for 23 years, I'd worked as a sign language interpreter. Wonder what would happen and what God might do with it if I started learning Dutch Sign Language. And so I started taking Dutch Sign Language at a deaf community center down in Amsterdam. Was I already doing that when you came?
Well, you were so, like, you were not, I know with with the traffic laws, like you were trying to get your license, like you would.
We were trying to get our visa.
That's right.
And driver's license and all that.
So
Yeah,
you were still kind of like, how long had you been there before I came?
We came in August of 2002.
Oh, okay. So you've been there not even. Oh, so you hadn't been there that long.
Not
I came
a
in
long
February.
time. No, not a long time.
Wow.
And so,
oh no, I came in 2004.
2004. So I would have had my license. Chris was probably working on his because most cars are stick shift. They think automatics are for disabled people. So I took my license test first, and I took it in a stick shift. If you take your driver's license there in an automatic, then you get a license only good for automatic cars. You're not allowed to drive a stick shift. And one of us needed to be able to do that. So I got mine first with a stick shift so I could drive anything. And then Chris took his license test later. And we've been driving for how many years in the U.S.? You know, we weren't young when we went over. And so we knew how to drive, but we still had to take like 10 lessons. Yeah. And before we could take the test.
Isn't that good they do that? Well, thankfully in Holland you don't drive on the other side of the road.
No.
Oh, that would be like so hard. That would be so hard.
Yeah, it's like
well, so tell us, how old are you?
I have to stop and think. My birthday's next month. Actually, I'll be 59 next month.
59. So when did you start learning sign language?
Started learning sign language my senior year of high school. So in 1974, 75, I graduated in 75, and I took my first sign language class during my senior year of high school at a local community college.
So was it just a free class, like an elective?
No, it was.
I really wanted to do it.
I took it as like an advanced placement kind of class and got college credit for it, but while I was in high school. And then the summer after I graduated from high school, so the summer of 75, I took a second class at Cal State Northridge, which was nearby. But then there was a gap because I came away. I actually came to Texas for my freshman year of college. Went to Hardin-Simmons in Abilene, and while I was there, there wasn't a sign language program. There weren't sign language classes, so I had to. It was just a gap in my period of time when I was learning. I ended up going back for my junior year or sophomore year, I guess it was sophomore, junior, and senior years to California. Went to Cal State Northridge, and midway through my sophomore year, I started taking the next classes. At that time, they didn't really have full-fledged bachelor's and associate's programs in interpreting and all of that. Oh. So the next class I could take was in sign language interpreting. I'd had American Sign Language 1 and 2, took interpreting 1 and 2, not wanting to be an interpreter then, but I wanted to learn the language, and the only other thing available to me was taking interpreting classes. I also took song signing classes, music music, because they had that available. And it was actually in the midst of my second interpreting class that I got asked to start interpreting at a local school district for adult education job training. So if I look back now, I would never have hired myself at that level, at the skill level that I had. Somebody took a chance on me. They hired me, and I learned most of what I learned about interpreting. I learned kind of seat of the pants. You know, as you do it, you learn. You have deaf people that are supportive, and they work with you and give you advice and tips. And so I started working as an interpreter. There is a national certification. At the time, there were two, from the National Association of the Deaf and the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. I took both of those and got them at one point, but it was years after I started interpreting back then.
But you knew what you wanted to do in college. So your last year of high school, right? Did you know you really wanted to learn sign language and go into that?
Learn sign language, but I didn't think about it professionally. It was just a fun language. I thought it was cool, beautiful language. I wanted to learn it. I really wasn't planning to interpret, but when we had to go to the career lab in high school and look around and decide what kind of career you thought you might want to do, I knew I liked language. I didn't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. The only thing I could figure out was, well, I guess I'll become an interpreter and work at the UN. But I was thinking spoken languages, which is kind of cool. I had no thought of sign language in that mix. Then when I started going to college and I ended up redirecting and becoming a sign language interpreter, finding I really loved doing that. I was interpreting, but not internationally, not with a multitude of languages, just American Sign Language and English. And I did that for a number of years until we really sensed that God was calling us to go overseas. And honestly, as much as I loved interpreting, I thought that was meaning giving up my interpreting.
Oh, and you're going to go into ministry.
And go into ministry.
Huh.
And we were going to be working with the church planning team and all of that. And I really thought it wouldn't be working with the deaf. God was asking us to change directions, and okay, if that's what you want to do. Amazed how easy I found it to just give it up and say, okay, you can have it back.
Well, now, when did you get married?
Got married in 1986.
Were you in college still?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you were, see what happens? Like, so you actually majored in languages.
No, I majored in liberal studies. It was a very generic.
So was that because you could
degree.
pick, like...
I was thinking initially when I started college that I'd go into education, and then I started thinking deaf education.
Yeah.
Realized I don't like teaching, so I never pursued the teaching credential part of it.
Yeah.
At least not at like the elementary school level. Ended up for a while, I did get an adult ed teaching credential. I taught sign language for a while.
So you majored in deaf education?
I majored just in liberal studies with the thinking of going into deaf education, but never did pursue that.
But you kept taking sign language in college?
Well, I took as much as they had, which was not much back then.
So what nowadays, just so people can hear, nowadays, do they have that major?
Yes, there are bachelors in interpreting, bachelors in deaf studies, there's associate's degrees in all of that. There's a lot of opportunity for that now. In fact, after we ended up moving to Holland, where we met you, I wanted to start learning Dutch Sign Language. I knew American Sign Language and thought, let's see what happens if I learn Dutch. And got to the point, like a lot of those kind of classes, I took my first classes at a community center. The first class, you get a lot of interest, a lot of people come. Second class, you can offer less classes because people drop out. By the time you get to level 3, they didn't have enough people to continue the classes. My only other option in Holland was to go to a college and take a bachelor's program, and I had to choose between teaching sign language or interpreting in sign language. Now, mind you, this is in Holland, so it's all in Dutch. So I'm studying at the college level in Dutch to learn how to... I chose interpreting because I had interpreting in my background. And to interpret between my third language, spoken Dutch, and my fourth language, Dutch Sign Language. And
now, let me just say this. This is not what most people could do. Like your husband, he can't pick up... Because for you to be able to pick up the language and go to school there, right?
Right.
And so that's pretty incredible.
I have a head for language.
This woman has a head for language. So how many languages do you have?
I have 4.
4, and then sign language.
Well, no, that's
counting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Spoken English, spoken Dutch, American Sign Language, and Dutch Sign Language.
Okay.
And
that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I ended up with a bachelor's degree there in Dutch Sign Language interpreting between spoken Dutch and Dutch Sign Language.
How long did that take?
It's a 4-year program I got through in 3 years because I had, waivers from classes and experience that I had here in interpreting. Their system is a little different than our system. Not a little, it was quite a lot different actually.
Yeah.
Because you get assigned to a study group and you stay with that same group through every class for 4 years. And they tell you which classes you're taking in which semester and what time, and it's very controlled. And whereas here, you know what classes you need to take for your bachelor's, and you decide, well, this semester I'll take this one and that one. Oh, I want a lighter semester next semester, I'll just take these 2. And you can pick your own pace and all that. There you don't. You follow a very structured program through the 4 years with the same group of students in all of your classes.
So which was better for learning?
You know, it's just different. It was nice having that group of students where you got to know each other and you got comfortable together, especially in a field where you're having to perform, in essence, as you're interpreting and doing practice in front of the class. You need to feel comfortable with the people that you're with, and it's not a new group every class.
So for you were born in California.
No, I was born in Texas.
No, you weren't.
I was born in San Antonio.
Goodness, oh my gosh, she's dear to my heart.
Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force, and so I was born on Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio. But before I was a year old, we moved to Biloxi, then we moved to Tucson. Dad got sent for 3 months to Alaska, so my mom and brother and I went to Oklahoma City for those 3 months. When he came back, we went back to Tucson, and then he got out of the Air Force, and we landed before my kindergarten years in Southern California. So I grew up out there.
Yeah,
but I'm a Texan.
So when you went to Holland, you went from California. So you'd been in California. You went to college
from kindergarten all the way, except for the year in Abilene.
Yes, well, and I loved being in California when I was there. It was hard to leave, when I was being called elsewhere. And in your case, going to Holland, that would have been exciting. So how did you go from getting all the training in sign language to joining Greater Europe Mission. Were you married by then?
Chris and I were married, yes. And
So you got
we'd gotten involved. We'd gotten involved with the missions team at our church in California, and we were supporting missionaries they'd come home and we'd help arrange meetings and that kind of thing. I had an aunt and uncle that spent 30 years in Uganda with the Southern Baptist Mission Board.
Wow.
They came back through California. We got talking with them, just picking their brain, asking questions. How can we be better support for people that are overseas? In that whole process, it's a long story, which would take probably more than your show to tell the whole thing. But the short version is we just really sensed God calling us to go somewhere. We started exploring that. We did an exploratory trip. We went to Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, down into Germany, where the European headquarters of Greater Europe Mission was at the time. And I honestly thought I was fascinated with Luxembourg, with the language situation. They speak Luxembourgish, but they also speak German and French. The government uses French for the high level stuff. People tend to speak German just every day in homes. It's Luxembourgish. There's like 3 languages going on.
So that's where you wanted to be.
I was fascinated with that. There's people that come to Luxembourg. The whole country had, I think it was 500,000 people in the country, 250 in the capital city, but there were like 250 international banks. And people would come from all over Europe, all over the world to work in those banks in that international setting, learn the ropes, and then go back. You had an incredible opportunity for outreach internationally from this small country.
So were you looking at sharing the gospel? Were you looking at helping as a...
supporting church planning teams, evangelism, that kind of thing. But before we went on that exploratory trip, I was fascinated with Luxembourg, and I was convinced God was going to call us to Luxembourg. Chris kept thinking Holland, and I just figured that's okay, God will convince him when we get there, it's Luxembourg. But when we got to Holland, we both just really had this sense of we have to come back here. And I can't explain it any more than that, but we did. That's where we spent 10 years. Our goal was working on a church planting team. We had teammates there that Ann knows. In fact, that's how we met.
Yes, there were so many cool people there, right? It was really a wonderful group.
So we were there and did that, and it was in the midst of having learned the one language and just being fascinated and loving the deaf community. Decided to take sign language and see where it went, and I had absolutely no idea it would go to where it's gone today.
Girl,
that's another story.
I can't even believe how like you went from me seeing you there learning all this stuff to seeing you here when you came in town. You're flying all over the world. You're actually area director. Like they've never had a female, and this is really cool. They've never had a female this high up in this organization.
Well, in the area director role. So
they've been hired.
I had a boss that was above me. My first boss above me was female. But in the area director role, I learned, and I didn't know that. I just want to put the right person in the job, and I'm not real personally caring whether it's male or female. Right. But you look around an organization like that, and it's a fairly large organization, and they've realized they're really trying to focus on why is it that we don't have more women in leadership? What are we not bringing them up? Are we not, allowing for that process? What's going on with all that? So they're really trying to look at it. I didn't know I was the first female area director they've ever had. Until I got into it.
Well, and part of that makes sense, and so we want to talk more about what you do now, because it's pretty incredible how much you travel, and just your abilities are so profound. And it makes sense because you've been learning them since you were in high school. And I had no idea that it started way back then. Yeah. And I talk to people a lot about, are they doing what they majored in school, right?
Oh,
and so many people aren't. And
and in one way I'm not. In one way. Because if I knew back then where God would put us now and what he would have brought us through in the meantime, I probably would have been Jonah in the belly of that fish.
Gone the other way?
Gone the other way. I would have been scared to death if he had told me too far ahead of time.
Of course, you don't ever know what's going to happen.
No.
Right? But yeah, because you've done so much. So let's take a break.
Okay.
We'll go to commercial. When we get back, we'll talk more with Terri Chapman from SIL. About being an area director and what exactly the linguistic side of it, everything that she's doing. So you guys stay right here and we'll be back to talk more on Living Well.
You are listening to Living Well with Ann Beal. We'd love to hear from you with comments and questions about the show. Please send us an email to ablivingwell@gmail.com. That's ablivingwell@gmail.com. Now, back to this week's show.
Welcome back. I am here today with Terri Chapman, and she is the Global Sign Language Team Area Director for SIL, which is a faith-based linguistic organization. And we've been talking to Terri. She is actually visiting in Dallas-Fort Worth area today, and so I grabbed her. She's been here for training.
Well, for meetings.
Not training. She doesn't need training. She's the director.
Well, no, I do need training. We all need to keep learning. Never stop.
Well, and so it's so fascinating what she does now. She travels quite a bit. She has a team that helps her. 38.
I think we've got 38 right now globally. It's the focus of our team is to support deaf communities around the world that want assistance with language development issues. So we do have teams that we work with that are very interested in having the Bible in their sign language. So we support them in that goal. We have other teams that just want help creating a dictionary of their language or learning about the linguistics of their language or supporting those deaf communities around the world in whatever their language goals are. And there's all sorts of other areas too. We're looking at the idea of the needs of trauma healing in the deaf community and providing that kind of support as well. A lot of what we're doing is supporting teams that are working on Bible translations, and they do the translation, we don't. So they're the native signers, native speakers in a hearing world, but they're the native signers of the language. We're not. But we can come in and we can help them know how do you translate. We can help with training, help with setting up of a project, help connect them to funding organizations to fund the work they want to do, help them with publication connections, help them with checking for accuracy as they translate, all of that.
So Wycliffe Bible translators, they are not used. They're because you think of languages, right? So you think of Wycliffe as translating, like going to New Guinea and whatever languages from those tribes, making a Bible in their language, translating, coming up with, figuring out their language.
That's what's happening. The ultimate goal, the idea is to have, and a lot of people with SIL come through Wycliffe, and they're loaned out from Wycliffe to SIL.
Which is why here it had on the front gate Wycliffe as well.
There are Wycliffe offices in the building here as well. Okay.
So they work.
There's partner organizations. Wycliffe is a missions organization, and SIL is a faith-based linguistics organization. So it's not technically a mission. It is faith-based. We're open about that, but we don't publish Bibles. We don't. We assist the language communities in meeting their goals, which oftentimes then are including wanting Bible in translation in their language.
So SIL is set up as more as a business that helps out.
It's a nonprofit.
Missions?
Well, it's a nonprofit organization that's focused on linguistics and on language development.
Okay. So when you think of that with Wycliffe, they translate and make a Bible in that language, like for that tribe or that area. How do you make a Bible of sign language?
Generally speaking, most of the time it's videoed because sign languages move. They're not static. To put something on a paper, you can't do it in words because then you're going back to English or back to Spanish or back to whatever other language.
Even pictures would be hard. And
even pictures are static, and sign language, the facial expressions are a part of the communication, a part of the language. If you have a non-expressive face when you're signing, then it'd be like talking in a monotone and you have it's your intonation, your body language, your facial expressions are all part of that, and you can't get that in a drawing.
So they video the whole Bible, or just books of the Bible?
Well, there's two different approaches that teams use, and we will present to teams options, and then they give them the pros and cons, and they make the choice of what they would like, because again, we're supporting their language community goals. One approach that teams use is they will use what we call chronological Bible translation. They take selected passages of Scripture that will, rather than just do every verse, say, or every section in the book of Genesis, they'll take the creation story from Genesis 1. it's stories. We used to call it chronological Bible stories, but people got the idea that it was just telling stories. It wasn't real Bible translation.
Right.
They're really taking passages of Scripture and translating them. But rather than do an entire book, they will take selected passages that help people understand the overall message of Scripture quicker by pulling out key passages which help communicate that. Once they've gone through, there's a story set that's often used. It's not the only one, but it's one with 110 stories. They're selected passages out of Scripture. The first set of 32 was, they call, How Do I Know God? And it's passages that basically Genesis to Jesus. There's a next set that, I forget how many are in each set, but the next set is How Do I Follow God? So I know God now, how do I follow Him? And there's selected passages with help with that. And then the third set is basically How Do I Be the Church? But they call it How Do I Serve God? But those passages get deaf people to understand quickly the overall message. And then they'll often, with teams, back up and fill in the gaps. There's other teams that choose to do a whole book and start that way. And and there's pros and cons to both, and either one is fine. It's just a matter of which option that language community wants to do. Oftentimes, interestingly, with book by book translation, as we call it, they'll start with a book like the Book of Mark, because Mark it gives the gospel message. It's one of the 4 gospels, and it's shorter than the other gospels. There's interestingly less names and names of places mentioned in the Book of Mark than in the other gospels, and names for places, people, all of that is trickier to translate than other concepts. You have to create name signs.
Right, that's what I was thinking. You have to create some movement.
Right, but then they're not generally known because you're making something up if it's not already established. So, and a lot of countries around the world, in America, we fingerspell a lot of things. We just fingerspell a name. We just that it's in America we're known for that, but most deaf communities around the world do not like fingerspelling. They will do anything to avoid it. They'll create name signs for everything, but you're having to create those biblical name signs then. So there's a lot more complexity when you've got a lot of that. Mark has less of those, so it's shorter. It's got the whole message, but there's less of that kind of complexity. So teams will sometimes, and very often actually, choose the Book of Mark to start with if they're going to do a full book.
So that's fascinating. So like movies, okay, when they're going to have a movie, they hire different companies to help them make the movie. Like there may be animators and there'll be digital and there'll be, and so you're like one of those, like for whatever, that you come in and you help assist them with whatever they need.
Our team people will do that. We can help teach them computer video editing. There's different kinds of training they need. They need just basic translation principle training. How do you take one text from one language and put it into another? There's 4 areas that we really look for in a translation, and we call it the CANA approach, C-A-N-A. You want it to be clear in your translation, so the message that was communicated in the one text is communicated clearly in the other language. You want it to be accurate, so you don't want to go off on other tangents. You're translating the text, so it needs to say the same thing in the end. You want it to be natural in that language, because oftentimes, I studied a couple years of Spanish in high school. I cannot speak Spanish fluently. I can pick up a little bit if I hear it. But if I try to say anything in Spanish, it's not going to be natural at all. It'll be weird English type influenced grammar. Even my Dutch. I'm fluent in Dutch, but people can tell I came from an English speaking country. There's certain ways I'll put things together because my brain functions initially in that English language mode. And so my translation into Dutch isn't going to be as natural as a Dutch person's translation into Dutch. You want it to be natural in the language. And then you want it to be acceptable in the form that it's presented. And the community decides what is acceptable to their form. That may mean who is the signer on the video when you finish it. Who is, how do you want the video to look? What's the graphics behind? That type of thing.
Right.
So you want those 4 elements in the translation, but we'll teach those principles. We'll help them know how do you set up, how do you design a project management. You need to be able to be accountable for what you're doing. You're getting funds from organizations to do this. You need to be accountable for that. we will send in consultants that will help them check the accuracy. We're training local people as consultants so that they can take over consulting roles. The idea is to, as much as possible, to enable and to, build capacity within the local language communities. And then we can also teach video editing skills. You've got to be able to do that for the sign language.
It's just so interesting because I think that people, when they think of missionaries,
Mm-hmm.
right, they only think of church planting.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that you go out, you have a church or with it. But the truth is, in ministry, there are
so many options.
Yeah,
we need IT guys.
Right.
We need, there's all sorts of things.
A digital, like graphic artist, to everything.
And a lot of times, that's another thing we're trying to keep as much with the local language community as possible, is that there are local deaf people doing the artwork that supports their video, creating their own artwork designs and that. But they need people in those projects that are skilled in those aries.
It is amazing, like even accountants, and it's almost every field you need to.
Yeah, my husband's the accountant.
Oh, is he? But I believe that.
Yeah, but we need people who can help the teams work with those project funding funds and make sure that we've accounted for them accurately and above board. So he helps review some of that. He helps even just process expense claims and things like that. So we need people like that.
Definitely.
But people don't tend to think of that in the ministry world.
Right. They only think of like a pastor and his wife going off into the field somewhere.
Right.
This is very exciting to do this. And you actually head up these teams. In how many countries do you travel to?
Well, my travel is a little it's a little complicated question. It varies from year to year. We're serving projects right now, active projects that I believe we're at around 25 of those. I say that
25 countries?
25, pretty much for us with sign languages, it's 25 countries, although there's one, Thailand, there's 2 projects going on. One of them, the Thai Bible Society, is running a project that's doing a book-by-book translation. There's another project team that's working with those chronological Bible translation passages. They're both working in Bangkok. You'd think, why have 2 projects in one language in one country? But they're very parallel, and they complement each other, and the 2 teams are working more and more together.
And you go to Bangkok?
I have gone to Bangkok. Now, I don't personally work directly with the teams because we have people around the world that are doing that.
You have people for that.
Yeah, I'm the global director of the team, helping set a lot of the directions, helping handle a lot of the administrative stuff. I oversee 6 people on our leadership team, and then those 6 people supervise. We have about 38 people worldwide.
But you were always traveling.
I travel a lot. I've been traveling a lot more in this role than I have in my previous roles. More than I want to sometimes.
I shouldn't say always.
No, but I mean, I've been since I took over this role, I've been in Malaysia, been in Thailand, Germany, I'll be in Singapore this year, I'll be in, where else am I going? I lose
Germany.
track.
Well,
I've been to Germany.
You're going to Israel.
I'll be going to Israel for a conference. I lose track of where I've gone and where I've been. The first half of 2016, I put 60,000 miles in my mileage account. Now, gratefully, the second half of the year, the only trip I've made is this one to Dallas, and the rest of a lot of my work, a lot of it is on Skype and Zoom and other internet.
Zoom. Now, Zoom is getting very popular.
Zoom, actually, for us, works a lot better. We need to work because we're working with the deaf. We need to be visual. We need the video communication because we're signing over the internet to communicate with some of these folks. And we need that steady internet connection, and we're just finding that Zoom has a more stable connection.
Right.
And so places where we find other things like Skype that just tend to fall out, the Zoom tends to be more stable. So we're using that a whole lot more. We have a corporate Zoom account so that we can put more people in the meeting, and we can have.
And I've heard people say Zoom. If you haven't heard of Zoom and you don't use it for your business, you got to use Zoom. If you haven't heard of it,
there is a free account, but you're limited on how many people can be in the meeting and how long the meeting can go. It's not that expensive to buy a paid account, and so we bought a basic level paid account, and it's been meeting our needs quite well. So, but we will go back and forth. We'll use Skype, we'll use Zoom, whatever.
Right.
Some of our teams have used the Google, Hangouts.
Hangouts, yes.
Sometimes that works well for a team. It just depends. We also have the issue that some countries just don't have solid internet connections, and so we need the most stable program that we can use if we're going to need to try to communicate with them. But yeah, I do end up doing a lot of travel. Next year will be a little bit less because we've restructured the leadership within SIL, which means I need to attend a few less global meetings for SIL as an organization. And that may not reduce my travel because it will actually free me up to do some things I've wanted to do and haven't had the time and ability to do. And that's to visit some of the other partner organizations. One really cool thing in the whole sign language, language development, Bible translation, whatever world, is that there are not a whole lot of partner organizations, but the ones that are there really do work together. They're not all, grabbing for their own little territory. We really do work well together, and we have some great relationships. But there's some of our partners I have not had the chance yet to visit in their locations, their offices. I'd like to be able to do that. I'm trying to take advantage of some things. Like last year, I went to a conference in Malaysia. It was a workshop for a week that was led by a deaf partner organization that SIL actually helped to establish years back. It's deaf pastors and leaders from the Asia Pacific region who are working with getting into countries and looking to see what the language situation is, what the needs are. Do they have an identified language? Do we need to do survey work? Is there a group of people interested in a Bible translation? Do they need, what other needs there? Mm-hmm. And then what they've been doing is they find the needs, they get groups kind of started, pulled together, and then they'll bring in one of the partner organizations saying, hey, listen, can you come and help in this country? So and then they do workshops for teams that are already established. And so they were doing a workshop for a week in Malaysia. There were, I think, 58, if I'm not mistaken, people who attended this workshop, mostly from the Asia Pacific area. I believe there were 23 different sign languages represented among those 58 people. Mm-hmm. There were only 7 of us in that group of 58 that were hearing. All the rest were deaf. Now, we said already, it's not universal. There are multiple sign languages around the world. But deaf people have a way of communicating with each other easier in international contexts than we poor hearing people do.
Poor hearing people.
Yeah, you drop me in the middle of Russia with a hearing Russian person, and if they don't speak English, I've got a major problem. I can't do Russian. But you drop me in the middle of Russia with a deaf Russian, and we will start communicating probably within 5 minutes.
Wow, really?
Because the language is visual. The signs are different, but the language is visual, and you start picking it up quicker. So deaf people find ways to communicate internationally a lot quicker than hearing people do.
And you've learned so much about, it's interesting. One of the things that we talked about mm-hmm. earlier was the resources mm-hmm. for deaf people. I'm just so surprised mm-hmm. that it hasn't gone further. I mean, it's 2016 mm-hmm. and, there's still not a Bible translation of the Bible for deaf people.
There's not one complete Bible in any sign language
in the
world.
I just can't even believe that because they have it in Braille.
Well, Braille for the blind. Right. How many English translations do we have? How many Spanish translations? How many French? Deaf Missions is a partner organization based up in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and they have been working on the American Sign Language Bible translation. They've completed a New Testament. They are about 5 years away from completing the Old Testament. When that's done, that will be the first ever full Bible in sign language.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing that we talked about was services for the deaf.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, having a wellness clinic
mm-hmm.
and counseling and
mm-hmm.
life coaching and helping them in trauma, right? Like we've had one, and he could read lips, right?
Which is a challenge.
And
not
easy. He had been. His hearing wasn't completely gone. He was legally deaf.
Mm-hmm.
He was, he could hear some.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started thinking, well, that's why he came to me, because I don't have it. I don't have sign language as one of my languages. Mm-hmm. But are they serviced very well for trauma? And are there counselors that know sign language, right? It never dawned on me before.
There are some, but they're few and far between.
Right.
And so most of the time, if a deaf person needs counseling, they end up needing to bring in an interpreter with them, which puts a third party. The interpreter's neutral. The interpreter's there to facilitate the communication. But you still have a third party in the room. And it does add another dynamic that you can't avoid it because there's a third person there.
So that would be even confidentiality. You'll have
well,
to.
And interpreters do have a code of ethics, and confidentiality is one of them. No matter what the assignment is, you don't share anything about the assignment. It's not your information.
Right.
So that is already there, but still, that elements are. If you can find in any profession, be it counseling, be it anything, a real estate agent that can sign. If deaf people know there's a real estate agent that can sign, they need to sell their house. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to the person that signed.
Yeah.
You car mechanic, whatever the profession is, if there are people in that profession that can sign, they will find them and they will go, a doctor or whatever.
And there aren't very many. So guys, think about this. Think about getting, learning a second language and have it be sign language, because it'll be great for your business. Because I thought about that.
No matter what your business is.
Right, any business. Because I started thinking on the way here today, thinking if I knew sign language and I put that, because I don't think I realized how little resources are there.
Right.
And so let's take a break real quick. We're going to go and take a break real quick and go to commercial and stay right here. When we get back, we're going to talk more about this with Terri. And as a female in this organization and being in such a top position and traveling to all these countries, which, I asked her about safety. We're going to talk more about that because I want you to hear what it's like for her as a female, and then also balance with her family in light of her traveling. So stay right here and we'll be right back with Living Well.
You are listening to Living Well with Ann Beal. We'd love to hear from you with comments and questions about the show. Please send us an email to ablivingwell@gmail.com. That's ablivingwell@gmail.com. Now, back to this week's show.
Welcome back. I am here with Terri Chapman from SIL, and we are here in Duncanville, Texas. And she's been telling us a lot about what she does and her life working as the Global Area Director.
For the Area Director for Global Sign Languages team?
Yes. And one of the things we talked about was her traveling so much. And we wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like for your family. How much do you travel, you think?
The first half of this year, I was in the air 60,000 miles. It was the first 6 months of the year. I think the longest stretch I had at home was like a 3-week stretch. It was crazy.
So does your husband go with you?
Sometimes yes. Sometimes no. There's some places that I go that he has no interest to go.
Right.
No desire at all. He went with me once to Asia, and he doesn't like heat and humidity, and that did not.
Was that why he did?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
Funny.
He's also a very picky eater. He'll
kill
me if I say that on the air, but that's okay. No, he wouldn't kill me.
You live in Colorado, so that's a pretty awesome environment.
It's beautiful.
And so, he's
great weather.
He's spoiled.
Oh, I don't know if I want to say that, but he doesn't like, he gets hot very easily. And so that the whole Asian humidity, I mean, you're right. We've been in places that were just barely above the equator. And
really?
Yeah. So it's hot. It's humid year round. There's not winter, summer. It's rainy or dry.
Oh, okay.
And that's it.
I thought maybe he didn't want to go because they had machine guns or something, but he's not like that.
He would think about that, but he's not. It's more the where he's going and the culture and the food. He's just, like I said, a picky eater. But when I stepped into this director role, one of the things that he said was that his line in the sand was that he didn't want me gone from home, away from him, more than 7 weeks of the year. Now, I've traveled a lot, but some of that travel was with him. And so that doesn't count against that 7 weeks. Now, this year I may have overstretched that boundary slightly, but we're working on that. That's our goal. Some of the meetings he goes with me, and he's participating with me in them because he does have a role in this work as well. Some of them I do go alone, and he would just be sitting in a hotel room waiting for me to be done with the meeting. It's not really worth him going somewhere. But we try to maintain that balance. That's just something we're really striving for.
Well, and it's good for your marriage, right? It's hard if you're gone a lot, right?
Right.
So do you like traveling so much?
You know what? It's funny. People think, oh, how it's so romantic. You're traveling internationally. You're going all these places. The actual travel itself isn't all that fun. You're sitting in a big moving machine that's flying over the middle of oceans and, whatever, for hours on end. The travel itself is not fun, the time change and all of that. I love being new places.
I would think.
So when I'm there, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. when I'm trying to get there and get home, that's not
as fun.
It's not as glamorous as people tend to think.
Do you get to enjoy the places, or do you just end up going and coming right back?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Chris went with me last year to Malaysia for some meetings, and we, at that point, that was one of those times where we sent him with me because I had back-to-back meetings in Malaysia and then in the Netherlands. And he, rather than me, I wasn't going to miss his birthday. His birthday was like 2 days in between those two trips, right, in that time frame. I was going to fly all the way home from Asia for a 2-day thing, not to miss his birthday, because that was my commitment to him, and then fly off to Europe. And our current director, I was not director at the time, I was moving into that role, said, no, this is crazy. We're going to send Chris with you one way or the other. He would love to have gone to the Netherlands. That's where we lived for 10 years. But it didn't fit his schedule with some things he needed to do. So he went with me to Malaysia. And that left us then a period of 3 days or so in Malaysia where I didn't have to rush off to Europe. He didn't need to rush home. So he actually got to spend his birthday in Kuala Lumpur. At the Hard Rock Cafe, he likes to collect the pins. And
is there really a Hard Rock Cafe there?
There is.
No
I
way.
picked up a pin in Bangkok for him. I mean, they're all over. But we got to together do some touring around Kuala Lumpur. There's some fascinating history, beautiful places to see there. We've tried we're going to need to go down to Colombia for meetings in February. Chris is going. Our anniversary is during that, just after that time frame. So we're already there. We'll take 5 days of vacation afterwards and just see a little bit of the country.
So did you dream when you were younger of going on your anniversary trip to Bogota?
Not particularly.
It is beautiful though.
No, it'll be. I'm very excited, and Chris really wants to go there.
And
with
he's
me.
going to get you an emerald while you're there.
Well, okay, you're going to have to talk to him about that one.
That's the place.
Okay, but yeah, he does want to go to Bogota. He's very interested in doing that and going with me, and he will be part of the meetings as well. So he won't be just sitting waiting for me. He's involved in those meetings. There are places I'm going now that were not on my bucket list.
Right.
Definitely not. But it's fascinating. I'm getting to see and do things. You know, I rode an elephant in Thailand, and
I can see you doing this.
Yeah, I've got video of that one.
And you'll have to share stories. I know you have some fascinating stories about people that are deaf being extremely impacted by what you do.
There are, by the result of the work that we support there. There's deaf people typically around the world 90% of deaf people tend to be born to hearing parents, and oftentimes, number one, the parents don't often discover the child's deaf. They're not expecting it. They're not looking for it. Until several years into the child's life, the child's lost a lot of language acquisition, the key years for language acquisition. Educational availability around the world, it's not wonderful in America, but it's way better than a lot of countries. In some, there's just no access to education. There's a deaf woman that recently expressed in Tanzania. She says, I was born deaf. My parents didn't sign. I didn't even get to learn to sign until many years later. They didn't let me go to school. I just was doing housework, that kind of thing at home, until I finally started meeting some deaf people in the deaf community and interacting with them, learning sign language, learning I can communicate with people who are like me. In the process, she would hear them talking about God, had no idea who or what that was, and she got her hands on the Bible translation on DVD that the Tanzanian Project is working on, and started watching that, and she came to faith in Christ, and she says for the first time her parents are seeing her smile. They're seeing her enjoy life. They're seeing her with a purpose for life. It's impacting people where they live.
How old is she? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look back at the story that we got from the field. The Tanzanian team went up to the northern part of the country to do some testing because they checked the translation with local people. That's a whole other story. We could tell another time.
Yeah.
But they were testing when the earthquake hit in Bukoba recently. And it took a couple days or a day or so to get a hold of them on WhatsApp and find out, make sure that they were okay, that they weren't underneath rubble in a building, and they were fine. The people that were testing were fine. And we thought, okay, well, they're probably going to go back to Dar es Salaam where they live because the earthquake hit and they can't keep testing. And they said, no, because we look around. We're here to test scripture translation. We look around us at people who are fearful. They don't have peace. we know where to find peace. We're staying. And so they stuck it out. They kept testing and working with people, talking with them about what they were doing, because they felt like they had a message to bring that can help the people that were in a non-peaceful situation. There's story after story that comes in from around the world of people whose lives are just impacted and changed.
Well, I never really thought about the fact that just because they have someone at church up front doing sign language, doesn't mean that the person really understands.
No, because you're always going through another person. There's always going to be something, no matter how wonderful an interpreter is. And in America, we have some wonderful interpreters. We've got credentialing situations, all of that, certification. But in many countries, you don't have that. You don't have trained interpreters. You just have a family member who might be able to sign a little bit, but it's not real knowledge of the of the translation process. And so you may or may not. We hear stories from deaf people who, my parents took me to church. I sat there, but there may have been an interpreter. There may not have been.
Right.
Even with an interpreter, they're not quite getting it. There's a story of a man in Tanzania again. Just happens that I'm hearing a lot of good ones coming from Tanzania right now, who says, I was in church, I heard stories, but he said, until I got that DVD that had those Bible texts in my sign language, in my heart language, the language I think in, the language I dream in, he said, until I got that, I never really understood. And so the impact that's having by just getting information. And we're talking about scripture translation here, but there's other areas. Every area of life, the deaf tend to be the last to hear information. AIDS is rampant in Africa, but deaf don't get the communication about that the hearing world gets. So there's some materials and some things that have been developed to help understand AIDS, how you get it, what happens, how to protect, all of that.
That's right, because you don't just help missions.
Right, we'll help in language development needs.
Right.
And so there's something, we've helped with translation of some of those types of materials, or teams that want to translate that. There's a variety of things.
Amazing.
There's a team in South America right now that is actually, the Bible translation team is in good contact with the National Association of the Deaf. The National Association of the Deaf there is saying, we realize we don't really fully comprehend our own language, the linguistics behind it, the structure of it. Can you come and offer us some training in the linguistics of our language? And sure, yes, we will do that. So that's supporting that language community with what they want to develop their language.
So let's talk about the money side of this.
Yeah.
Where do the funds come from? Like for you, and you're in this incredible position. So you raise your own support.
Chris and I raise our own support. It's through individual donors, through churches, wherever we can get the contacts. And that's what we live on, our personal living. Now, my travel expenses are covered by funding that's raised through the organization, or that comes through also support services we provide to the projects, can get built into project funding that the donors then incorporate into their funding.
So basically,
covered.
You have to raise your living.
I have to raise my living expenses.
Now that just means
expenses.
Like what you eat, spending money, and
house payment.
Your basic living.
Basic living costs. And actually, Chris and I both work full time with this, but the way mission stuff works, we get one salary for two people. So it's two for the price of one.
Wow.
If you want to think of it that way. We have to cover our own health insurance. It's through our organization that we work through, but we still have to raise the funds to cover it.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of people, as you have said as well, that if you're doing ministry in America, or if you have to raise money and you're living in America, people have a hard time thinking of missionaries being in America.
Right. They think of people that are overseas, and that's very valid. But there's also people like what we've tried to communicate to churches and to individuals since we've been back. We may be living in America, but our work is global.
Right.
And it's broader now than when we were living in Holland.
Yeah, because it's interesting because you are actually doing more of what you were doing in Holland, but to a whole nother level because you're heading up and actually directing and running
an international
all
team.
These people out, kind of doing what you were doing when you were in Holland.
Right.
And so your impact is even greater because you're over all these different areas in different countries.
All of that, yeah.
So how would people donate to you and Chris?
We've mentioned SIL in this whole process, and that's who I do my day-to-day work through. But we actually have raised our support, our financial support, through an organization called Greater Europe Mission, based in Colorado. And they loan us out to SIL to do this work. So our donations come through Greater Europe Mission. And what you would do, you can go onto their website, and it's www.gemission, MISSION, no spaces, no dots, .org, and then click on the donate button, and then you'll come to a page where you can select our names, Chris and Terri Chapman, from a list. You can make a one-time donation, a special gift. You can make a monthly commitment.
Can you do it for any amount? $5?
You can do it for any amount and everything. Sometimes people think, yeah, all I can do is $5.
$5 is great.
Let me tell you, those $5 add up. You can pick the amount, and you can do it through a credit card. You can do it through writing a check every month if you want to do that. You can do it through an automatic bank withdrawal. Whatever. I mean, there's different options on the website to do that. But yeah, any amount is helpful.
Right.
And we are short right now because since we've come back to the States, we've had some fall off just because we live in the U.S. We've had, in the last year, as we get older, so do our supporters get older. We've had people die. We've had people retire, have to stop giving.
I've gotten older, so I do understand that because I've met you before. And that's exciting. And so that would be wonderful if you guys would consider giving to Chris and Terri Chapman. Again, just go to gemission.org and then push the
donate page.
section.
Yeah, I'm looking on my phone app and there's just a donate button on there, but I think on the website there is probably on the menu selection and you click donate.
On your phone app, you'll right below donate is where you put in their names. Chris
yeah, it says
Terri.
enter the missionary name and then it says find and
it's Terri, Terri.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Chris, Chris.
I think if you put in even the last name Chapman, it will come up.
That makes it
yeah,
easy.
you can certainly try that.
And GEM, Greater Europe Mission, is who I went over with when I went to speak in Holland.
Right, and that's where we served under them, directly under them for 10 years in Holland.
I can't believe it was 10 years.
And it was, when we came back here, I had already had the connections with SIL from things I was doing there. That is probably another story. I don't think we got to that this time.
Then my daughter, when she was serving actually volunteering at an orphanage in Africa. She came through Holland and stayed with you and Chris for a week, and she was fresh out of high school, right? Just early, right before college. She was probably very interesting to have there for a week.
We had a number of people that stayed with us through that time, and we loved that. I mean, it was. The houses aren't big in Holland, but what we had, we like to be able to host. We really love hospitality kind of thing. That's our house in Colorado. When we moved back here, we've got 2 guest bedrooms, and they get used.
We will come visit you.
You must.
We will have to come visit you.
You need to do that.
Well, the thing about Holland for me that I remember more than anything is the kitchens were very small.
Yes.
They don't cook a lot in Holland, I guess.
Well, the kitchen isn't the priority in the house, and you buy a lot of pre-prepared foods. The second house not the first house that you were in with us. That one had an oven actually.
They did have an oven.
But
you cooked.
Yeah, but the first house or the second house that we moved to after that had no oven. It had a microwave convection thing, but it was small and it wouldn't fit a lot of my pans and that kind of thing. We ended up buying a very small, for American standards, freestanding oven. Interestingly, you want a funny story about Holland and. We still wanted to make our turkey at Christmas, Thanksgiving. Now that meant paying like a lot of money, like €6 a pound, for a turkey, and we had to order them, and they came in fresh from France. They were not as big as what we get here. We got much smaller ones, but we needed an oven that would fit my turkey pan. And we went looking for something, and we just weren't finding it. And we had one guy in the store there say, well, to cook your turkey, he says, well, just cut it in half, and but no, it's not. That's not how you do the turkey. But because that's not something that they cook regularly. Right. But we had trouble finding an oven that would fit my cookie sheet, that would fit any of that. We had 4 burners, and we had a microwave convection, but that was all that was in the house.
That's what I would see often. And there was this very wealthy couple that I went to their house, and they had a very big house, and they actually did have a big oven. But
it's rare.
Yeah, they're just little microwaves. So it was just such a wonderful experience. I am so thankful you came on to talk with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
It's been very interesting. Again, we just ask that you go to that website and donate to Chris and Terri. Chapman.
We appreciate it.
And just pray for Terri. She's traveling all over. You go to Israel soon.
Well, next year. I'm going to come back to Dallas for a few days in January. The end of January, beginning of February, I have to be in Colombia. Beginning of March, I have meetings in Singapore. In April, I will be in Israel for a conference, and with a group of deaf people able to take then a 6-day tour of Israel prior to that conference. So that will be
That'll
exciting.
be wonderful.
But that will be all led in sign language with a group of deaf people, and that will be a fun experience. I will be back in North Dakota for the Summer Institute of Linguistics that SIL holds up there every summer. Not for the whole summer. I'll be there for a week of meetings. And I'm not sure. I think I'll be back in Bogota in August for workshop series with deaf teams from around the Americas. And I don't really know what else might end up being on my agenda, but that's what I know of this
So
coming
be
year.
praying for her and her husband as they travel. And just thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you.
And we will look forward to having you back in January. We're going to have her on TV as well. So you guys take care, and we hope that you've learned today a lot about the deaf missions. And there is an app. I didn't want to forget the app.
Oh, partner organization, Deaf Bible Society. They're actually moving from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Dallas, Arlington to be specific. And they publish an app called the Deaf Bible app. It's free to download, Apple, Android. You can go on their website and you can watch online. And when various projects around the world have completed any portion of Scripture and it's been checked, it's done, ready to publish, then they put it on this app, and it's free to watch. You can see a number of languages. I think they're at around 18 right now. I'd have to go back and count.
You showed me. That was so cool. So check out that app, Deaf Bible app. Do you download it on Google Play?
You can download it Google Play or the Apple Store, either one.
Apple Store? Okay. So you guys check that out, and you take care and live well.
Thank you again for joining us. We can't wait to see you again next week.